top to finish, I want to introduce to some and present to others none other than Dr. Michael Jones, the underground professor, my very great friend. And I'm going to tell you, for this little girl right here, Sharnice Milton, I was astounded when my best friend, Dr. Michael Jones, came all the way from Texas to the funeral of my daughter. And I can never thank you enough. And one of the most beautiful things that ever happened is that we went to dinner that evening, and there was a little girl who was doing her little, she took her phone and she wouldn't come over to you, but she took her shot with you in the background and sending out messages to her friends saying, "I'm having dinner tonight with Santa Claus." I thought that was so
I remember
cool.
that. That made her day.
Yes, it did. Yes, it did. Um, Tonight, sir.
I guess you
Don't.
can see, Ken, that I shaved it back.
I
And
know. I know.
yeah, I did it because of all the procedures and things I had to keep doing, the MRIs and stuff, and my beard would be everywhere, and had the X-rays and procedures and surgeries and crap. So I shaved it back,
Uh,
and, and I had
well,
to relearn how to eat again because without all that hair here, you put your food in your mouth differently.
you can find it for quicker. It's
Yeah,
like truth.
I was like, oh my gosh, look at this! I can eat now. I'm gaining weight because I shaved my beard.
Now I want to do this real quick. Come here. Come here real quick. Don't be all anti. Don't be anti. Okay. Just going to be a little anti here. All right. Good. Thank you. This is Jacob. And Jacob is my 6-month Maine Coon cat who refuses to do any shows with me anymore since he doesn't have a contract and he isn't getting paid as much as your cats do when they come on the air. There you go.
It's because he thinks you're a racist calling him a coon.
He probably does. He probably does.
See, Tiger Lily
Oh,
jumped in. He didn't have any problem here.
see, look at
Hey,
that
that
cat.
tiger.
Do you see that cat up there? There you go.
There
Aren't they
you
beautiful?
go. Uh-oh.
There you go.
Do you know they said that cats are one of the few animal species that can recognize themselves
Mm-hmm.
in like mirrors and stuff? Yeah,
Ah, what do you say? No contract, no cameo.
that's right. They on Cat Book they got together and decided to unionize.
Gosh darn it. Darn unions.
Speaking of that, I can't believe that Nevada's unions didn't vote strictly for Trump. They're
Yeah.
not going to have jobs if they continue this COVID lockdown, and that's what Biden promised. So,
Yeah.
these people literally voted their jobs away
Yeah.
under Biden. I don't understand that unless it was fraud. That the
Exactly. And
union bosses did this.
the fracking thing
Right,
as
in the
well in
fracking in
Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania.
I just can't figure it out. Now, first and foremost, you being a constitutional scholar, I got to ask you here. I'm gonna be as naive as I possibly can, or at least appear to be Chris. Sorry, Anderson Cooper. Um,
Or, yeah, Silver.
so,
Don Lemon or Silver or what of those guys.
exactly.
You look
Um,
more like Joy Behar, though, than any of the others.
I can be angry like Joy Behar too. I can be. But is there such a thing as election fraud, and can it be done collaterally and in an organized fashion across the country?
Um, is there election fraud? Yes. And there is in every single election. There's election fraud, without a doubt. Um, it's usually small enough not to affect too much. As I used to be, for my bona fides, you mentioned a couple of things, but I'm also spent about 10 years being an election judge here in Texas.
Wow.
And I know about the counting and the canvassing and the tabbing and all that junk. Um, so the there's always somebody who tries to slip in a few ballots. I lived in a county that was so red, there was no point in Democrats cheating. They couldn't cheat enough, to sway the results. Let's say,
Exactly.
yeah, they could. They can now. I think we've purpled enough. Which Texas is an odd thing right now because there are some counties where they are almost completely Hispanic and they went with Trump over Biden. But
Hmm.
then there are other counties like in Houston and Dallas that were overwhelmingly Biden, and that's where most people live. And the typical Democrat voters live there. That's where they get their source of strength, and that's increasing. So it might not be too many more elections before Texas goes blue, and when that happens, there'll never be another Republican elected because without our 35 electoral delegates, there's no way anybody can get to 270. With Republicans anyway. Democrats have other routes, but because it's all coastal. But once Texas and Florida fall,
Yes.
and you think there's another thing about fraud. I've been trying to think of things about the fraud from outside of the box instead of just the standard. We know they're doing it. We know we've always made jokes about dead Democrats vote instead of and white Democrats are too busy working. White Republicans are too busy working to pay the death toll. At across the
Hmm.
river Styx,
Exactly.
and but the Democrats have time to go vote because they don't work. The dead we're talking about.
Exactly.
So I've been trying to think out of the box here, and why is it there are four states with the majority of the people in this country: California, Texas, New York, and Florida, and
Hmm.
we all have majority. We are huge, okay, and yet we all got our stuff in on election night,
Yeah.
and and by deadlines too. Florida was a little bit behind the rest of us, but that was, I think, because of attempted fraud in certain counties there, but I can't prove it. My cat just fell off the dresser. He fell asleep and rolled off it. Um, the the so what I want to know is why all these surrounding states could get their act together with this many people and voters and problems, while the swing states, the what do they call those states?
It's
The
battleground states.
contended, yeah, but the contended states,
Yeah.
um, you know what I'm talking about. I'm talking about Arizona, Georgia, Nevada, and Pennsylvania, and North Carolina.
Exactly.
Um, so why is it none of them had their act together? Some of them states are no bigger than counties in Texas.
Hmm.
Some of our counties in Texas are as big as these states. So
Exactly.
why can't they get their act together? It's not like they're processing 10 million votes like Texas. They're processing 3 million, and
Hmm.
uh, and yet you go and you look at the counties in these states. So the states are having problems. So let's go and look at like Michigan and Wisconsin.
Yes.
They had a problem getting their votes in too. But if you go and you look at it countywide, it wasn't the red counties that were having the majority of problems. Now there were a few red counties that were slow. Uh,
Hmm.
don't get me wrong. I'm not saying only red counties got their act together. There were some blue counties that got their act together, but the majority of counties that have a problem getting their votes tallied and reported were blue counties in all the contended states, and they came in with magic things like 23,000 votes that were all for Biden. Not a single Trump vote in that block. How is that even possible?
Not
And
humanly.
then you see that there were 350,000 votes switched accidentally from from Republican to Democrat in one state. Um, I think Michigan was that, and that there were 50,000 double votes in Michigan. Well, that's
Hmm.
enough to switch Michigan, because we're talking about all votes counted. Bullcrap. We're talking about all legal votes counted, and you guys talked about that last night. I think you and the that blind guy. Um,
Dave Milner.
yeah, him, right? And Although how he, well, never mind. Um, it's Braille, I'm sure. Uh, he's the only guy I know who uses Braille toilet paper.
There you go.
So yeah,
Read them
um,
and weep.
right. Mostly weep. Read them and sweep. So anyway, I love Dave with all my heart. You and he are my best friends in this whole world. Um, so
Likewise, man.
why is it that these things can happen, and yet the left, no one, the media, the Southern Poverty Law Center, the ACLU, the NAACP, none of those guys have run forward and said, "Wait a minute, there's voter suppression here. Uh, there's bad ballots. The dead are voting. There's incredulous anomalies like the 23,000 votes that came in one block from a blue county, and not a single Trump voter. Not a single Trump voter.
And
That doesn't happen."
at 3
Yeah.
a.m. on the morning of after the election in Detroit,
Right.
130,000 ballots are delivered in wagons
In person.
and all types of equipment. And then they put up a shield so that you couldn't see them counting those particular
Mm-hmm.
ballots. And the statement from the Michigan Secretary of State's office is, well, that's not election fraud. We were just protecting those people behind the glass at that point.
Right. That were near the glass were afraid. So somehow sheets of paper put on the glass is going to protect them,
That's right.
whereas the glass won't. Right.
And
Right.
you
What they
gotta
were
love the
tired
guy.
of is people.
You gotta
Yeah.
love the guy who's holding that sheet of paper because he's the one who's gonna keep them from all hurt, harm, and danger. Really?
Right. Yeah. Like the Dutch boy with the dike, sticking his finger in the hole. What they didn't want was all the people that were sitting there watching them and were yelling at them about fraudulent activity. And there are some places where they said, "Well, it's a lie. There were poll watchers from Republicans and Democrats in there." Okay, well, sure, but they were over 25 feet away. And I can barely see you on my phone right now, and I'm a foot from it. Uh,
Exactly.
there's just no way any of these poll watchers could see anything that was happening uh, and tell it what's fraudulent. They couldn't tell if signatures matched. They couldn't see anything. The people 25 feet away, the people 6 feet away could have been committing fraud. The only thing you could see is if, say, someone was filling out ballots,
Mm-hmm.
right? Had their
Mm-hmm.
little marker and was going through. Well, that was actually happening, by the way, and poll
Sharpie.
watchers found it. Yeah,
Yep.
and they were. They said that these things were inadvertently filled out with Sharpies, and they had to use correct pens on it so that the machines would read it. But there was no one there to make sure it was transferred correctly. There was no one there to see how many Trump ballots were there. A postal worker was arrested on Tuesday trying to get into Canada. He actually had a truck full of mail with some ballots, and he tried to get into Canada, and he's been arrested, and the Postal Inspection Service has him tightly gripped around the short ones. Um, and he's been doing it for over 3 weeks, evidently, stealing mail and hiding it, throwing it in dumpsters, giving it to his mom, whatever. He's had a whole bunch of different stories. Uh, uh, we found one place where they actually threw Trump ballots into a trash can, and they were
Mm-hmm.
easily seen. But then we hear the claim there's no fraud going on. As an election official, when I was a judge, if anybody would have claimed that we were committing election fraud, I would have been offended. But I was very vigilant with my group of people. I had
Yes.
people I could trust, and I kept an eye on them. I allowed poll watchers, and I told them they could be anywhere and they could be as close as they wanted, but they couldn't touch any of us and they couldn't talk to us. If they
Mm-hmm.
needed to talk, they could ask me to come over to them and I would talk to them. But they weren't to talk to any of my workers. They were there for observation. They could make the notes and make the reports. And if they thought there was anything going on, they could, call up their people and have the legal people start the process or whatever. Uh, and
Doc,
I never had a problem with poll watchers. But I know fraud goes on.
Doctor, let me just ask you here, because there are a lot of
Ask me
people
anything.
that will ask you something. There are people who would say that this is a conspiracy on behalf of the Republican Party to try to advertently change the election and to change the vote count so that votes that came in after midnight don't count. Is there any truth to that whatsoever?
Yes. It's not really conspiracy. We're being blunt about it. you know, the fact is that, like in Pennsylvania, the state legislature, which constitutionally, we're a constitutionally federated republic,
Mm-hmm.
and the Constitution in writing says that the legislatures of the several states will make up the laws on elections, meaning that we'll have, remember, what is a state? What is Texas? What is, well, everything but Washington, D.C., which somehow still gets to vote and participate, which pisses me off because it's a federal city and shouldn't have any rights to vote.
Mm-hmm.
You you suspend your right to vote when you move to Washington, D.C.,
True.
in my
Very true.
opinion. That's the way it was designed. It was supposed to be politically neutral, and it was a place to run government, and it was squared off and designed, and by, what are those guys that wear the funny red hats? Um,
But
Everybody's afraid of them, Da
oh,
Vinci writes about them all. Masonics. The
oh,
Masonics designed Washington, D.C. So there's probably conspiracy. There are probably rose lines and stuff under your house right now.
exactly.
But it was designed to be politically neutral, and Washington D.C. is anything but politically neutral, and it is in fact highly Democrat, highly fascist and communist, and sadly, the Democrats, speaking of conspiracies, are trying to make D.C. a state, which goes against everything that the Constitution and the Northwest Ordinance and the framers of the Constitution believed in,
Mm-hmm.
and what we believe in. But why do they want to make D.C. a state? Well, they want to make it a state because it gives them two more senators, which will break filibusters, and it will give them at least one or two representatives, which will help keep the House for them. And it will basically ensure that with the electoral delegates that are automatically Democrat, it will basically ensure that Democrats win most elections, especially if they bring Puerto Rico in as well
Yes.
as a state. I have a great offense that my capital would be in a state. If you go back and you look at it, when the capital was in Pennsylvania, people understood it because we had just gotten out of a war and we Articles of Confederation and we had to set things up. Things had to begin somewhere.
Yes.
But when it got moved to New York and everything, and then they said, you know what? We don't want them in a state because New York got all the favoritism. It got all the pork. It was really favored.
Yes.
And they said, this won't work. The rest of us want our share of the trough. So they created the federal city. Thomas Jefferson donated part of his land for it,
Mm-hmm.
and of course it was swampland, so it was a pretty good deal for Jefferson to get rid of. But it was created out of that purpose to keep them out of politics and to make it a neutral place for our government to run. We are stating boldly that we want all the votes to stop because in Pennsylvania, the state legislature said your ballot must be received by 8 p.m. on Tuesday, election day. And that was by a Republican legislature, which is the constitutional empowerment to decide these things.
Yes.
The courts are involved in elections by deciding things with a yes or no answer. That's their limit. Yes or no answers, right? Is
Yes.
this constitutional? Yes or no? So when the Democrat governor and Democrat attorney general of Pennsylvania went to the completely Democrat Supreme Court, which is shameful that Pennsylvania, the birthplace of our country, is all Democrat, basically.
Yes.
Um, it the Supreme Court ruled with the Democrat governor and attorney general that they could have extended times to receive ballots. Um, okay, so that's not what a court does. A court says, is it constitutional to limit ballots at 8 o'clock p.m. on Tuesday, as the legislature wrote for election law? The court should say yes or no. And the correct answer, of course, is yes, it is constitutional.
Yes.
What's unconstitutional is the Supreme Court then created legislation out of the blue air, and it's not part of the legislative body, it's in the judicial branch. We have these separation of powers for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? But the judicial branch decided it was empowered to legislate, and it rewrote the Republican written legislation to allow for votes to come until Friday. There already were rules in place for military ballots. There's an exception for them.
Yes.
And so this lie out there that Trump and his cohorts that we want to stop military ballots from being counted is ludicrous. It's just simply ludicrous. There are some challenges out there, like in Nevada, it's a military town. It's got a military base there. And when you're in the military, you can vote in your hometown, or you can change your registration to where you're stationed.
Exactly.
Okay? You get a choice. Your spouse does not. Your children do not. And so they have to get driver's license in the city that they're in, or at least it used to be that way. You know, it may have changed since I was in the military, but at my time, my wife had to get an Arizona driver's license and register to vote in Arizona. And so I did too, because I was living there for 7 years and it just made sense.
Yeah.
And that was back when John McCain was still a patriot in this country before he became the traitor that he became. And his family is riddled with traitors in my book, because if you ask me what is the cause of all this fraud and problems with the ballots and voting and everything, I'll tell you directly, John McCain's family, in my humble opinion, because they went out and they why? Because they went out and they endorsed Biden. They endorsed other Democrat candidates, and they, with their force of nature, the McCain family is a political force unlike any other family in America. And what they say goes in Arizona. And it was like, what's his name? Used to be Carson County's representative, Harry Reid.
Reid.
When Harry
Exactly.
Reid, was Nevada politics while he was around doing that. That's the same way the McCain family is. And they swayed a lot of the people in Arizona to vote Democrat instead of Republican. And I think a lot of that will bear out. But there's also a lot of dual party ballots that they found in Arizona. So there's a lot of them that voted Democrat for president, but Republican for other people, for senators, reps, and stuff. And there's a lot of ballots where the president and the senator were Democrat and everybody down ticket were Republicans. But anyway, their influence changed Arizona, which was 11 delegates that were solidly red, and in the Republican camp that Trump had to make up. Exactly. And if you'll notice, when it was Fox News that called Arizona for Biden early. Now, I don't disagree with their call when they made it. I wish they hadn't, but they're a TV show. They get to do what they want on that stuff. It doesn't matter. It doesn't. There's nothing in the Constitution that says they can't do that. In fact, the First Amendment says they can. And it's just their opinion that Trump won, or Biden won Arizona, right?
Yes.
So I think that affected voters in Arizona that could have gone out still and voted. And I think it affected other states too, because polls out in west of that were still open. But needless to say, I think it's strange that no other TV news shows followed suit. I think one did. I don't know what, ABC or something. I think they
Yeah.
followed suit
Yeah.
hours and hours later, but not anything near. Uh, but always, if you notice, they called Arizona, and Biden got 11 electoral delegate points and jumped way past Trump. And then there was that magic stoppage of like 4 hours where no votes were counted in any of the contested states. If you're looking at their maps, they had red for Republican, blue for Democrat, and yellow for contested, and white for undecided or not, finished counting. Um, and the contested ones were Wisconsin and Michigan and North Carolina, the others I read earlier. Well,
Yes.
you'll notice that most of them stopped counting during that. I mean, was a complete break. And then when they came back, Biden magically jumped 187,000 votes in Pennsylvania. Just boom, right? Okay, well, how does that happen? And how is it that the longer we wait, we see Biden's numbers keep going up, big, and Trump's numbers creep along, if they
Yeah.
go up at all. And so there's something hanky going on here. Um, and there are witnesses and stuff, and they keep saying there's no evidence. Well, how do you get evidence if you're a poll watcher in Georgia and you're 25 feet away, or in another state there was 80 yards away? I heard
Exactly.
one of the senators on Fox News today talk about that they were 80 yards away as poll watchers. That's a football field, you know?
Exactly.
That's like the Cowboys. Can't see the end zone from where you are.
From where you are.
And yeah,
No,
right.
but a lot of
It's
these practices, Doctor, a lot of these practices that went on in this election have not been seen since the glorified days of Jim Crow in the late
right.
60s, early 70s, when
Yes.
things like this was done, and people said it's wrong, but there's nothing we can do about it. And apparently, that's the message that we're getting from the media with Hunter Biden and now with the election. It's wrong, but there's nothing we can do about it. Why don't we just move on and accept it for the way it is? And so I want to transition this conversation to the point. Have we turned the corner on us being a constitutional federated republic to being a mob ruled democracy where people use fear and intimidation in order to carry the day in governance?
That's an interesting question. Perhaps I have become archaic as a constitutionalist.
Okay, good.
There's no point in being a constitutionalist anymore because we don't have one. It's ignored
Thank you.
uh, all the time, and if it's quoted at all, it's only quoted when it lines up with them. Whatever, Republicans or Democrats. The only time they ever quote the Constitution is if it's on their side. If it's not, then they ignore it. Right? It's
Exactly.
like lawyers say: if you got the facts, argue the facts. If you don't have the facts, argue the law. If you don't have the law, just argue. And we're at the argue point in politics here. But you know how I get angry when people say that we're a democracy, or that
Me
this
too.
is bad for democracy and stuff. And all the reporters are saying this on all the shows: CNN, ABC, NBC, CBS, Fox. Everybody keeps saying how this is affecting democracy. Bullshit. I'm sorry. Whoop, whoop.
Good. Good. Good.
I'm alone with animals too much.
There you go.
There you go. Is that a bleep?
There you go. We're a republic. We're not a
Yeah.
democracy.
Thank you. And I've been saying, quit using the word democracy because it's being used intentionally to change the groupthink of America. And guess what? If you're a democracy and you're in the Democratic Party, which is really the Democrat Party, not the Democratic Party, and you're not democratic if you're in the party, you're a Democrat. But they can't even get that right.
Mm-hmm.
But okay, so now you associate our government with Democrats, and they changed the word republic because why? you may associate the government with Republicans, and they
Mm-hmm.
didn't want that. So a psychological, you got to think about this. Somebody was sitting in a room with other people brainstorming, and somebody actually stood up and said, I think we ought to change the word from republic to democracy so that we can get people to think about the Democrat Party and not the Republican Party. And somebody else said, that's a good idea. And so they went out and they started doing it. And then all of a sudden, everybody started saying democracy because it was easier than saying republic. I
Yeah.
don't know why it's easier, but it's less, it's more syllables. But they decided it was easier, and they started saying it. And then everybody started saying um, democracy instead of republic. And if you forget you're a republic, then you forget how our political system works and why it works the way it does, and the separation of powers. Even the sovereigns, we the sovereigns, there are separation of powers in the Constitution for us as well. Um, the the
Doctor,
fact
if
that
I
we're at
if I
mob
can
rule,
interject here, one of the
yeah,
promises of the squad, Alexandria Ocasio Cortez and
right.
Presley and Talib.
Yeah, who cares? It's them. They
It,
shouldn't be called the squad. I think of cheerleaders when I think of like the squad.
squad.
Perky little blonde cheerleaders jumping up and down. That's the squad. These people are the squids.
These
You know.
squids have
Yeah.
already suggested that one of the first pieces of legislation that would be put through is a request to amend the Constitution to get rid of the Electoral College. Can you
hmm
inform the American people why, since we've had that discussion about mob rule democracy now taking hold versus a republic, why the founding fathers thought an electoral college was important to keeping a republic?
Well, we are in mob rule, and the way you prove that, instead of just claiming it, the way we prove this, Ken, is that the mobs went out and ruled, and they were not shut down.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Only one time, one place, Trump rolled in with some troops, and they scattered like cowards. Um, but the rest of the mobs were allowed to go on in Oregon and Seattle and the other places. It's just incredible. Uh, and and you'll note all the mobs that Trump supporters are creating and going to all these polling places, these canvassing places rather. There's no violence. No one's getting hurt. No one's getting shot. There's nothing being burned, especially
Mm-hmm.
American flags.
Yeah.
So you can see the difference in sides here. One is a mob and one is a republic. And I'm afraid the republic is on life support if it's not dead. Now, the founding fathers created Electoral College for one simple reason. It was a compromise because the big states like New York and Pennsylvania at the time
Yeah.
would have the most influence on elections, and uh, and yet the uh, Electoral College ensured that the little states had to be paid attention to as well for uh, for elections.
Yes.
These. If you notice how important this election, by the way, is a perfect academic example of why the Electoral College is so important. Look at all the campaigning in small counties that both sides did, especially Trump. Look at all of the three three delegate or vote electoral vote states that were constantly being visited by both candidates.
Yes.
Again, mostly by Trump. Biden spent a lot of time in his basement of his mom's house hiding from COVID, but the uh, these states got a lot of attention, right? And
Yeah.
so what this did was, states today like Texas, New York, California, and Florida, they have a huge influence on the election, but they don't decide the election on their own. And you have to have all these other states put together. And look at this: Trump can win the presidency if he gets 5 states that we find fraud in, and we fix the fraud, and we get the legitimate votes. Then Trump wins those states, and then he becomes president again, reelected. Uh, and Biden needs just Nevada, which has just got 6 electoral delegates, a very small state, in comparison to places like Texas and New York. And yet that's all he needs to win election. And as it stands, with all votes counted as opposed to all legal votes counted.
Mm-hmm.
The the Electoral College was designed to give electoral power to small states because you can't ignore them. And that's what happened. And then you look after the Electoral College came in with the new Constitution, most of the presidents came from Virginia. There
Yeah.
were like 4 presidents from Virginia right off the bat. And that was not a huge state compared to Pennsylvania and New York. Uh, and so the Electoral College works. And if without the Electoral College, there would never be another Republican elected. And this is why the Democrats want to get rid of it. And that's the only reason they want to get rid of it. It hampers them because of the flyover states, the little people like us, they don't want to mess with. They don't want to mess with the Midwest and those other turkeys. They could care less about the Rust Belt or the Sun Belt, care less.
Mm-hmm.
But you've got, the Democrat Party is a party of coastal elites, billionaires, and high tech, and big banks, and and because of that, that's who they're beholden to. Now, how do they get elected? I could walk across America and never touch a blue state or county, rather, never touch a blue county, and I could go from Delaware or Rhode Island all the way to California. I think there'd only be one county I'd have to walk on that's blue, all the way
Mm-hmm.
from Rhode Island to California, and otherwise I could avoid stepping in a blue county.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that tells you something about how our country is distributed. And we all saw, like last year and this year, the famous maps that show the entire country by county. And you see it's almost all red with these little blooms of blue on the ends on the coast, west and east. And then you see a couple of pops of blue in Texas, and you got New Mexico and Colorado. Uh, and then it's mostly, red. Uh,
Yes.
this year it's a little more blue. That's because of fraud. Um,
Yes.
and first I asked, I'm sorry, Ken, the dogs, are they too loud?
No, they're fine. They're
The
fine. Come right
horses are
in.
in the backyard, and they're getting excited about. Hush. Um, the Margaret, Roxanne, hey, I'm going to kill you. Get over here. No animals were harmed, according to
In the
ASPCA.
filming of
Hush.
this interview.
Go to your bed. Go get in your bed. So um, if we don't have the Electoral College, there won't be Republicans, and the reason for that is, if you look at the electoral map as it is now,
Yes.
uh, and you look at it as a population vote, popular vote, which are always common, they won the popular vote, they should be president, blah blah blah. Well, that's not how it's set up because we have the Electoral College. But if we got rid of it, the popular vote would win, and that would mean that no one in Wyoming, in Iowa, uh, Oklahoma, none of these states, Iowa, Indiana, none of these states would matter because all of their votes come together wouldn't match up with California and New York, right?
Yep.
With the popular votes, and so you got that coastal votes. You got from Seattle, all the way down to San Diego, roughly, and and all of them are blue.
Mm-hmm.
Oregon's blue, that all the time. So in
Yes.
fact, they just legalized small quantity heroin, so you can carry around your heroin kit and walk around with no problem. You get a small fine like a traffic ticket, and you pay it online and you're done. Uh, I'm interested to see how that works because I can't see allowing heroin to be legal under the condition that it's so addictive you can't get off it
Yeah.
easily. And it is hell to get off heroin. So what are you going to do? You're going to use your heroin. When you use heroin, you got to use more heroin. So I would imagine Oregon is about to see a huge spike in crime to pay for the heroin, unless they provide free heroin to the addicts,
which
which then the
is
state has to pay.
which is one of the plans of the libertarians and the Democrat Marxists, and
Hmm.
it's very easy to sell people on the whole concept of the war on drugs being a failure. Why don't we just give drugs to everybody? And those
Right,
people
and
who get
legalize them so that we can control them.
exactly the people who get hurt most are always the poor people, always support the people without influence, and always the
Hmm.
minorities. Always get hurt with these types
And
of
don't think
liberals.
for a minute that the Democrat Party is the only party full of drug addicts. The
No,
Republican Party has plenty of them, and most of them are soccer moms.
yeah,
So,
true,
you
very true.
by
Listen,
the way, Ken, I owe you an apology.
oh my
Uh,
goodness,
I forgot. I forgot the network I was on was Urban, so let me talk like this. I'll talk with my deep voice.
there you go.
Is that better? I don't
Because
want to scare anybody. Oh
because
no, the white guys are here.
the
Eh,
women just love a man with a deep voice in urban America.
don't they? And a beard.
In a
Yeah.
beard. Oh, my beard's gone. There you go. Hey, I'm
What?
not loved.
Is that why you look naked?
That's why
You
I
know
look
what?
naked.
When you had your pictures going up, and I was sitting here waiting on you to come on, I saw a picture of Charnice, and my first thought was Mrs. Big. And but when I got closer, I realized it was Charnice.
Yeah,
At, but beautiful women.
they are.
Yeah.
They are.
And tell Mrs. Big thanks for Thursday night.
I noticed that she was missing on Tuesday night too. So was that part of the bid
Oh,
whist tournament?
we we were voting.
And we were voting.
That's right. That's what the kids call it these days. And we were voting.
uh, listen, Mike, I have got to have you come back because there's a lot going on. And actually, I'm not going to lie. Dave and I
Oh,
think you
that's
should.
good.
Yeah, because I live in a city that practice is common and it actually is heralded. But
Yes. Yeah, it's a resume enhancer in your city.
that's right. You
Yeah.
really
By the
need.
way, I agreed with the Redskin football team that
Mhm.
their name was offensive, but they got rid of the wrong word that's offensive. You know,
Exactly.
it was the Washington Redskins, and I thought they should get rid of Washington, but
That's
they got rid
right.
of the wrong name. Yeah. What's the
Oh
matter,
my
baby?
goodness.
Huh?
Uh,
Yeah.
Listen,
Okay.
I have not watched any football this year, so you know, I
Oh, that's
uh,
why you haven't called me to laugh and gloat, because the
yeah,
Redskins manhandled the Cowboys. I mean,
exactly.
this was like Custer's last stand. It was that bad. Yeah.
I
Oh
heard
wait,
and
y'all aren't Indians anymore. Yeah, you're generic football team.
I heard Andy Dalton
So
wanted to get closer to Dr. Fauci, so he went into a concussion. There you go.
yeah, yeah. Well, that worked, I guess, right?
I'm
But
closer to Dr. Fauci than ever. But
yeah.
first and foremost, you need to come on TECN TV as your own show. I'm not going to lie to you. Um,
No, I tell you
we
what, call me and we'll talk about it. And,
we
I feel
do.
a lot better and I can do things again.
Yeah.
Uh, I tend to get lazy and not do things, but I've been thinking about starting up my radio show again, and maybe I'll do this thing with you and
Yeah.
Dave.
You need to do TV,
And
man.
we definitely need to get back together and talk about Georgia because there's two runoff seats, as it looks,
Exactly.
for the
Exactly.
Senate, and it's going to be an ungodly amount of money spent there by big tech and big banks and stuff,
Dave
and by the
Milner's
Republicans.
Dave Milner says, "Tell the Prof it's great to see him back on and in his favorite pajamas." There you go.
Yeah, yeah. Are you talking about my Santa shirt? It's my Aloha shirt, dude, not pajamas. It's got little Santas on it.
chicks,
But,
chicks dig little Santas.
that's right, little Santa. Yeah. Size doesn't matter, Ken. You've heard this.
Often. It's gonna be okay. It's gonna be
Yeah,
okay. Uh,
right.
God bless you, man. We love you so much, and I look forward to talking with you very, very soon.
Anytime, Ken. I mean that. You call and let me know, and I'll do what I can
Exactly.
to get on the show. Most of the time, I'd be available. Because, you know, I've gotten to that age now where I go to Luby's at 5 o'clock and then I'm in bed by 8.
There you go. You're picking up chicks at the
So,
Denny's at 3 o'clock.
yeah, that's like I say. I'm retired at 58. So I don't know what to do. So I don't do anything. I just sit here and watch TV. I'm thinking about going on Amazon.com and buying me some model airplanes to put together.
That's a good idea. That's a good idea.
Yeah.
But we
I
need
also
you.
thought about getting like 1,000,000 Legos and building the Death Star or something. But then I thought,
It's been done. Who
I'll
needs to do it
step on
again?
them. I won't. I'm too old for Legos. I'll just end up stepping on them.
Dr. Michael Jones, you need to come back on the air, and we're going to work that out. We're going to make it happen.
Yeah.
Dr. Michael
By the
Jones.
way, my daughter lives in Utah now.
Yeah,
so she
I know.
said to say hey. She was just down here for a week, and we talked about you a lot.
Oh, I love her. So
I told him there's a whole lot to talk about.
She is so cute. She's one of those ladies that really doesn't grow old, and you just think she's one of the kids. She is so cute.
Still. Yeah. She used to teach like second grade or something like that, and I laughed because when I went in, I couldn't tell where the teacher was. It's like, that's terrible.
Don't tell her I said she was cute. Okay, she's a grown woman. She's a grown.
That's right. They're
woman.
offended by that.
Exactly.
You can't say that to women these days. You can say she's tolerably handsome or something, I guess. But, yeah.
She's cuter than most of the men I see at the GQ club. There you go.
Well, yeah. Gosh, jolly.
God bless you,
all right,
man.
Ken,
Love
anytime.
Talk to you later.
I can see the clock's ticking. You got to give me the bums rush. So
yeah, I gotta get.
You
to
got
a
real
commercial.
guest coming up here, I hear.
I got someone informational. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Author
someone knows what they're talking about. Yeah,
exactly. Author, please, Dr. Michael Jones. Love you, man. God bless you. Talk to you real soon.
Hey, do you mind if I give a shout out to the sheriff, my Tsarina, Mary, and of course the Agadorable himself, the unscented blind guy. So
chicks dig his beard. Chicks dig his beard.
I saw a picture of him, and he looks like the white version of you now.
We're twins.
So, with your old beard. Yeah, I thought, hey, these are Twinkies. Anyway, I love you guys. I miss you, and I'll see you all soon. And just give me a holler, and I'll be back.
God bless you, man. God bless you.
And by the way, everybody's got to keep your fingers crossed that Trump can pull out the fraud and expose it, because we're in trouble if he doesn't.
We're in a lot of trouble. I'm going to have you come back and we're going to talk about that, the trouble that we're in.
But it's radio gold for you guys, let me tell you. It's gold. Biden is going to be just, you won't even have to do show prep anymore, because he's just going to hand it to you.
I just don't want to see him. I don't want to see him meet Xi Jinping. I don't want to see him meet Putin. I don't want to see him meet Kim Jong-un. Don't meet
he won't,
anybody.
Ken, because Kamala Harris will have him declared, incompetent, and the 20th Amendment will be snapped on so fast that Kamala Harris will become president, and they'll get rid of Biden. Which is why that 25th Amendment crap came up. It wasn't about Trump. It was about Kamala and Biden.
Exactly.
So it'll be Kamala, who can't say her own name right. She'll be the one meeting these people.
I'm telling you, mattress sales will go off the charts thanks to Kamala being vice president.
Oh, I know it.
Yeah, dirty old.
And
mattress.
The good news is, when she meets the premier of China and Korea, she won't be taller than him, so it won't offend them. Yeah. Good night, my friend.
Good night. Good night. God bless
you. See you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, none other than Dr. Michael Jones. People always ask me at this particular hour, ladies and gentlemen, why is it that you stop? You're on a roll. You're having a great time. Well, it's very simple, ladies and gentlemen. I have to ask you two major questions. Number one, do you know where your children are? Number two, do your children know where you are?
It's 10 p.m. Do you know where your children are?